Good morning. It's a great pleasure. I'm joined this morning for our discussion of the Global Startup Ecosystem Report 2021 on our European panel, where we are seeking to discuss the situation of Europe and key trends that are happening across the European ecosystems. I'm delighted to be joined today by Maya Gur, joining us from Tel Aviv, Shell Hakan Nerfeld, Chief Strategy Officer of Vinnova, that's the National Innovation Agency of Sweden, and obviously Prince Constantijn van Oranje, joining us from Amsterdam and representing the Dutch ecosystem, and obviously leading organization TechLeap. Without further ado, I think I would like to invite you to first of all introduce yourself very briefly. Maya, if you would give it a start.
Good morning. I'm Maya from Tel Aviv Global, a municipality company under the mayor's office, in charge in facilitating and promoting the global quantum leap taken by the city, by the ecosystem here, in the global outreach. So happy to be here.
Great to have you, Maya. Thank you so much. And Shell, if you would briefly introduce yourself.
Yes, good morning, everybody. Jakob Nerfeld from Vinnova, the Swedish Innovation Agency in Sweden. Vinnova is an agency that is working with developing the Swedish innovation ecosystem and also supporting anything that stimulates and develops innovation in Sweden. And I'm very glad to be here on the panel, and thank you for inviting me.
And Shell, it will be interesting to hear, and let us dive into that for a minute or so later during our discussion, as you are developing what I understand is almost a hub and spoke model, capitalizing on the strengths of Stockholm, but also working towards a more regional ecosystem. So something in a sense where Sweden is probably setting an example for other parts of Europe that are seeing similar opportunities. Konstantin, if I may ask you to introduce yourself as well.
Yes, my name is Constantijn. I'm the envoy for TechLeap. It's an organization that basically is connecting all the dots in the Dutch ecosystem, but also connecting internationally. We're more and more focusing on really building the community. So from interventions that are more at systemic level now, working much more with founders to understand what they need and what they need to connect and grow from the Netherlands.
Thank you so much, Konstantin, for introducing yourself. And it's not a secret. What we've seen, particularly in Amsterdam, has been a meteoric rise, I would say. Very keen to hear what you've done to make that happen. It's not easy in the Startup Genome Global rankings. It's easier to show growth. It is very, very difficult to jump into rankings as all leading ecosystems show a significant growth. Amsterdam has managed to do that on a very consistent basis. Hugely impressive.
You keep adding ecosystems, so it's difficult. New ones add, so the group grows as well. So even to stay at one level is quite a challenge. But
that's right. You guys really have shown how to do it. So really, really interested to see what you've done and how that has happened. Allow me to very briefly set the scene a little bit with a few data points. Us being Startup Genome, you would expect a few data points to the beginning of any discussion. First of all, we've been working towards democratizing access to startup ecosystems. That's a very big word to make, but our intention as a company, as a team, as a members network, always has been to bring as much knowledge as possible to as many ecosystems as possible, for more people to participate in the unique value creation that we are seeing in startup ecosystems, in innovation ecosystems. And this year's report is evidence of that trend to be happening globally and certainly happening in Europe. So more and more cities, regions, clusters jumping on the startup ecosystem, the innovation bandwagon, for good reasons, as many governments obviously are seeking to find the next economic impulse that can help us fight off recessionary tendencies coming out of the pandemic. So it's great news in that sense. When we look at Europe, we see many more cities joining us. Just to spell out a few key findings, Europe takes the top 5 spots globally: London, Berlin, Amsterdam, Delta. When it comes to global connectedness with other ecosystems in the world, that's so important to build scaling companies in a successful scaling segment. We saw the number of unicorns triple in 2020 in the year of the pandemic from 3 to 9. Again, that's just evidence of what is happening in Europe. And the ecosystem value on average reaches in 2020 $6.3 billion US. That's the highest after North America, and that's really something to note. Really an important number to look at. Top 5 performers, the top spot in Europe, there's no surprise, it's London, followed by Paris, and number 3 already, Amsterdam Delta, followed very closely by Stockholm on number 4 and Berlin, Germany in number 5. Probably even more interesting to note the top regional challengers, those ecosystems I was speaking about that are coming through and they're building more and more and accelerating their development. And it's Copenhagen leading the pack, followed by Barcelona, Estonia with a dramatic rise, Madrid, and Zurich, Switzerland. So that's where we are in Europe in the 2020 rankings. And I would like to open up our discussion now. We've been talking about the global startup revolution for the last 10 years, as I mentioned, at Genome and within our members network. And that certainly came through in 2020 and is ongoing in 2021. So many more spots being added to the list of innovation clusters in the knowledge economy. When you look back over the last 12, 18 months, what are the 1 or 2 really exciting things, probably also scary things as we developed through the pandemic and its impact that you had to deal with that happened in your ecosystems? And maybe Konstantin, if you want to give it a first go.
Yeah, well, unavoidably COVID. So I think what we're proud of is we very rapidly mounted a loan scheme for bridging finance for companies, and we've seen that very few of our startups have actually failed because of the COVID crisis. Even in travel and events, it's been very hard, but they've grown, and now the funding rounds are incredibly substantial, more substantial than before. We've now gone from 1.7 billion last year to already up to 7 billion this year in venture capital. And it's growing, so it's really quite meteoric, as you said. I think we're very happy that after years and years and years of pushing and pulling, we have now a better options, share options, at least ruling that it's not where we wanted to be yet in terms of percentage of tax, but at least in when you pay. So that's good. So, and there have been, and we've have considerably more funding for deep tech as well, a few $100 million also from the government. And we don't propagate a lot of public money for these things. Usually we prefer to actually source in or crowd in private money, but as a first step, as a primer for a very hard market to enter, especially in the early stage investments, it is very good to have a few $100 million extra for deep tech. So some really positive developments, and actually on all indicators. Also look at exits, look at rounds raised. Things are going or looking really well.
That's great. Thank you, Konstantin, for giving us the perspective from the Netherlands. When I look at deep tech and in our report and our statistics, we can clearly see that deep tech, in a very broad sense, is still, if the wording is okay, a winner of the pandemic, as these companies really have been put into the spotlight when it comes to blockchain, supply chain management, when it comes to life sciences and health tech. Do you think we are in Europe already where we ought to be in order to help these companies incubate, accelerate, to fund them properly? You need a lot of patient capital. Typically, these things are coming out of research labs that take years and years in development. I sometimes have my question mark, are we getting that right in Europe as of now? Yes, please, if I may.
No, I think we're not even there, not even starting there. I think there's far too much public money still. There's far too little venture capital in the sector. I think if there's one area where Europe has a really defendable space, that it's deep tech. Is we got the science, we got the talent, that's all there, but it's really how to scale these companies into global companies where we need capital, and we need domestic capital for that as well. I think there's been a lot of foreign capital coming in. Some of that is very strategic. Not all of that is very helpful. I think in the long run to retain also IP in Europe and grow those companies. So I think it's an area that requires a lot of attention, and we'll be also focusing much more of it because there are very structural difficulties to get these kind of companies to scale. And but capital is really important, and talent, obviously. Another thing that really concerns us is diversity in the tech sector, and not only diversity in terms of gender, but also in how do we ensure that this sector that's growing so fast, that's employing so many people, that we actually get that to benefit much wider groups in society, and also that we remain very attractive for foreign talent also to come to work in the companies that are based here.
I would probably agree if I can, because one of the areas that we are focusing quite a lot now is just deep tech, and we had made some short surveys on the situation here in Sweden for deep tech, and I would say also talent and capital supply is something that we have to look into more deeply in order to be able to really pick up the value that is in all those kind of research and technology that we are investing in. But I don't think it's not only capital, it's really also skill development within the companies, because what we see, at least here in Sweden, is that you might need like 15-20 million Swedish kronor to reach product market fit. And that's not usual for venture capitalists to do it in so early stages with those kind of money. And also looking at how do you really design a capital supply process for the companies. I've seen many companies coming out of the university after the first very seed rounds. They have already been diluted and sold out like 40 to 50% of their ownership. So they have become employees before they are really starting their journey. So the financial engineering skills of the companies is also something that has to be developed for, and also the networking to connect them very well internationally in order to be able to exploit their potential value creation. So there's a lot of things. There's a very systemic kind of approach that you have to take into deep tech, and it's one of the sectors that where we really focus now and look into how we can help develop the Swedish deep tech sector.
Thank you, Kjell, for giving us that insight, and obviously we can see it a lot. I mean, these are companies coming through in deep tech from a technical perspective, an engineering perspective, a physics or a doctor's perspective, and then to look at the financial, the scaling skills to really build a company. That's probably a shortage that we are going to grapple with in Europe for the foreseeable future. And as ecosystem facilitators, we ought to make extra efforts to make sure we get these experienced people available in deep tech. Maya, brief look at Tel Aviv, the 1-2 things remarkable in the development over the last 12-18 months that you would like to highlight.
Sure, of course. Well, actually, I agree with what my colleague said. I think our ecosystem are kind of similar as well. Both of them are, the three of them are kind of small, modest size. And so the challenges are really similar. But for us in the last year and a half, even more, we've seen a tremendous growth and a new level of maturity of the ecosystem. Honestly, the COVID was the worst pandemic that we had recently, but for the ecosystem, I mean, it broke records in everything, in every aspect. The two main things that I would love to celebrate with you is as I said, the growth. We see more and more emergence of unicorns, even decathorns. So we are very excited about that. If in the past startups used to just grow a little and immediately sell to the US to a bigger company for $1 million or up to $1 million, today they decide to continue to grow themselves. And that brings to the new level of maturity. We not only have new companies growing and not selling, they actually decide to grow, stay here and grow in the city. And that's also an amazing thing for the ecosystem, because it provides, I mean, for the residents, the city, having such an industry flourishing here and its presence allows jobs and you know, all the things around it, all the small and local businesses that profit from it. So those are two of the things that we see, and we want to continue and promote their presence here.
That's great to hear. And when we look at our data, every job created in a startup leads to, on average, a factor of 4x in additional job creation. So the economic and the job creation effects, particularly of a scale-up segment, are obviously very, very substantial. I would like to run through the three of you really quick fire. What's the one initiative you would love to share with fellow European and other startup ecosystems that you're working on at the moment? And maybe Constantine, if I may start with you again.
Well, yeah, we decided to also do a very thematic approaches. But quite deep. So we're now focusing on health tech, and we've gone really into which segment gets which investments, staffing, all kinds of aspects of the health tech sector, because we found that though it was the biggest sector in terms of deals and also volume of venture capital in 2020, most of the companies don't scale. So it's only 29% companies that go from startups to scale-ups. And that doesn't mean that they actually then scale really into really big companies. So we really wanted to understand why that was and what's holding them back. And so we did a really deep dive into that. Actually, we're presenting it this week, and we're going to also follow through with programs to support health tech companies, especially through peer-to-peer connections and introducing them to more experienced entrepreneurs. Because what we found is that they're very science driven, and they don't typically focus too much on the market side and the actually, as you said, the growth mindset and growing the company, and also the financial engineering. So they dilute too soon, and they don't have a lot of choice in investors. So the local investor base is pretty narrow, and the ticket sizes are relatively small. So they become very dependent on their investors. And a lot of public investors as well. And there's the connection between the public investors and the private investors is pretty poor. And so when they really need that kind of extra investment, they stall. So for us, it's very exciting because you get really close on what the real issues are, and we can actually straddle a bit between the issues that entrepreneurs have and our reach into the public sector and other key stakeholders that we can now mobilize to improve the situation.
So really a highly focused cluster strategy, and I believe that's something where others in Europe actually can leverage what you're doing, really putting focus on a number of sectors or clusters, and really having a comprehensive strategy around developing those. Maya, when you look at Tel Aviv, the one thing you're working on that you would like to share?
As I say, we have amazing talent, but it's not enough. We need more. And so one of the things we're working on is creating programs that connect all the players together, the one that do the training, skilling, the industry, the residents, and we want to answer that demand of talent through training of residents here. So assisting the industry with it. So
focus on homegrown talent rather than attracting from abroad.
I think, yeah, that's something that we're going to do now. We're still working always with the university on attracting talent from abroad, but still developing inside. It's our main focus, together with helping the scale-up companies to scale and have their presence in the city. So those two together really combine and give a holistic solution for it.
Yeah, thank you, Maya. And talent shortages, I've been in the industry for the last decade. That's not new, even in the largest of all ecosystems, the Tel Avivs, the Londons, the Amsterdams, the Stockholms. I think that's something that's plaguing all of us. It will be interesting to see what can we do in universities. What can we also do with older and more diverse talent? I think Constantine made a point before. What can we do to activate other elements of population to really participate? Shell, few words on what are you looking at Vinova this year? What's the one thing to share?
I don't think of the one, but I can quickly make a few comments. One is sustainability. We have quite a lot of focus in sustainability, and not only addressing sustainability goals, but really making sustainability integrated in the business, making it a competitive advantage. And we have recently introduced something called sustainability readiness levels to measure the matureness of startups in their work with sustainability. We also look into this kind of, as Maya, on the coordination and integration of players, and especially also getting the corporates involved in the startup ecosystem. One thing that we're quite proud of is Ignite, which is something that we've funded that helps corporates to work together with startups in order to boost the startups business. But we are all from a national point looking how could we coordinate and integrate players and resources so Sweden becomes more rounder. So it's not only Stockholm, but regardless of where you are in Sweden, you can get the best help you can in order to be able to grow. And of course, as Maya pointed also, we have to get out of the exit trap. Sweden is doing too much exit too early. So having scalers grow with Sweden as a base, of course, is a policy goal we have.
Again, Chair, thank you for sharing that. I think the scale gap is something that's endemic in most places in Europe. We ought to work more on making sure that our companies have the runway, the financial runway, the talent runway, the very distinct support to scale. I know that a number of countries are really proactively working on it, not the least the Netherlands with a distinct program driving it, others as well. So hopefully we will see a bit more of scaling success on a broader scale all across Europe. Also, thank you for mentioning the sustainability discussion. We are very concerned about, first of all, sustainability goals, sustainable investment. What do we really consider as to be sustainable capital going into the ecosystem? And last but not least, obviously, the entire debate around climate change and how tech can help. And again, we are not seeing the scaling companies as yet that really could make a dent in helping us, helping the world overcome the climate crisis. And that's something I believe we all jointly, particularly as Europeans, ought to work on. We are almost out of time. Maya, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Constantine, it's a great pleasure to get your perspective on what's happening in the north of Europe, and Shell, obviously, to share what you're doing, particularly in regards to sustainability, deep tech, and also the hub and spoke, so really spreading the knowledge beyond the big cluster. Big thank you from Startup Genome and our network, and we will see you again very soon. Thank you very much.